"You're not man enough to leave," she laughed, humiliating me in front of our friends. My cheating wife had no idea she just triggered the most devastating financial revenge a tax consultant could deliver. When her credit card got cut in half at the boutique, she realized she'd underestimated the wrong man. My name is Winston Thorne. I'm 58 years old, and I've spent the last 34 years building my independent tax consulting business from nothing. Started in my garage with a used computer and a dream. Now I handle accounts for over 200 small businesses across 3 counties. I'm the guy business owners call when the IRS comes knocking or when they need someone who actually understands the tax code. Boring? Maybe. But it put our kids through college and bought us a nice house in the suburbs. That October evening at Romano's Steakhouse should have been a celebration. Our daughter Vera had just gotten engaged to a decent guy, an engineer named Paul who actually looked me in the eye when he shook my hand. Our son Miles was doing well in his IT job downtown. Kendra and I were surrounded by the Hendersons, the Carters, and the Montgomerys, couples we'd known for 15 years, people I considered real friends. I was cutting into my ribeye, listening to Tom Henderson tell some story about his golf game, when Kendra decided to drop her little bomb. She'd been drinking wine, more than usual, and had that particular gleam in her eye that I'd learned to recognize over the years. The one that meant trouble was coming. "Winston," she said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "sometimes I wonder if you've got any fight left in you at all." The table went quiet. Tom stopped mid-sentence. Sarah Carter looked down at her plate, like she was studying the pattern on the china. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, setting down my fork. Kendra leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine glass with that smirk I used to find charming. "I mean, you're so predictable, so safe. You wouldn't take a risk if your life depended on it." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Honestly, you're not man enough to leave this table, let alone leave me." The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. I felt every eye on me, waiting to see how I'd react. The old Winston might have laughed it off, made some joke about being too smart to leave a good thing. The old Winston might have swallowed his pride and changed the subject. But something in her tone, something in the way she looked at me like I was a piece of furniture she'd grown tired of, flipped a switch I didn't even know I had. I dabbed my mouth with a cloth napkin, folded it neatly beside my plate, and stood up. "We'll see about that," I said quietly. Kendra's smirk faltered for just a second, just long enough for me to know she hadn't expected this response. I walked out of Romano's Steakhouse that night like a man with nothing left to lose. Because, in a way, that's exactly what I was about to become. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to the Comfort and off Highway 34 and paid cash for a room. Old habits die hard. 34 years of handling other people's financial crises teaches you to always have an escape plan. I've been carrying $2,000 in my wallet for months without really knowing why. Now I knew. Sitting on that generic hotel bed, I pulled out my laptop and did what I do best. I analyzed the situation like a balance sheet. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I looked at my marriage with the cold eye of an accountant. What I saw made my stomach turn. The signs had been there for months. Kendra's new wardrobe that cost more than my truck payment. The mysterious girls' nights that started at 7 and ended at 2 in the morning. Her sudden interest in that hot yoga studio downtown. The one with the 20-something instructor who looked like he stepped off a magazine cover. I opened a new spreadsheet and started documenting everything I could remember. Dates, times, receipts I'd seen lying around. Credit card statements I'd been too trusting to question. It painted a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore anymore. My phone buzzed. Text from Kendra. "Where are you? This is childish." I didn't respond. Another buzz. "Everyone's asking where you went. You're embarrassing me." Still didn't respond. Third buzz. "Fine. Sleep in your car for all I care." That last one actually made me smile. If she only knew what I was really doing. I spent the next 3 hours researching divorce lawyers, private investigators, and asset protection strategies. By midnight, I had a plan forming. Not the hot-headed, emotional response she probably expected, but something methodical. Something worthy of the man who built a business from nothing. See, Kendra made one crucial mistake tonight. She assumed I was weak because I was quiet. She confused patience with powerlessness. She thought my silence meant I didn't have options. She was about to learn the difference between a man who won't fight and a man who chooses his battles carefully. Around 1 in the morning, I called Miles. My son had always been a night owl, and I knew he'd be awake. "Dad," Miles answered on the first ring. Mom called me freaking out. She said you just walked out of dinner. Miles Thorne speaking. "What happened?" "Your mother and I had a disagreement," I said carefully. "She said you stormed out like a teenager." I could hear the concern in his voice, but also something else. Relief, maybe? Like he'd been waiting for me to finally stand up for myself. "Miles," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Have you noticed anything different about your mother lately?" There was a long pause. Then, "Dad, how long do you have?" That conversation lasted until 3 in the morning. My son, it turned out, had been watching his mother's behavior change for over a year. He'd seen things, heard things, suspected things, but he'd kept quiet out of respect for me, hoping I'd figure it out on my own. By the time I hung up, I had more than suspicions. I had confirmation, and I had an ally. The private investigator Ray Morrison recommended was a woman named Sarah Chun, former FBI, now running her own outfit specializing in matrimonial cases. Her office was in a nondescript building downtown, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing. Perfect for someone in her line of work. "Mr. Thorne," Sarah said, sliding a folder across her desk, "I've done the preliminary work you requested. What I found isn't going to make your day any better." I opened the folder. Photos, bank records, phone logs, text message screenshots. It was all there in black and white, or rather, in living color. Kendra and some guy named Damon Reed, 39 years old, personal trainer at that hot yoga studio. The same studio where Kendra had been spending 3 evenings a week for the past 4 months. "How long?" I asked. Sarah Chen speaking. "Best I can determine, about 6 months. Maybe longer." The photos showed them at restaurants I'd never been to, hotels I'd never heard of. In one particularly gut-wrenching shot, they were coming out of what looked like a jewelry store. Kendra was wearing a necklace I'd never seen before. "There's more," Sarah said. "Your wife's been using your joint credit cards to fund their little romance. Dinners, weekend trips, gifts. I've got receipts going back to March." She handed me another stack of papers. Hotel bills, restaurant charges, a receipt for Victoria's Secret for $200 worth of lingerie that had never made an appearance in our bedroom. "The financial trail is pretty clear," Sarah continued. "She's been careful to mix personal expenses with legitimate ones, but the pattern's there. Classic case of using marital assets to fund an affair." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not rage. That would come later. This was something else. Clarity, maybe. The kind of cold calculation that had made me successful in business. "I need copies of everything," I said. "Already made them." Sarah slid another folder across the desk. "Mr. Thorne, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen men in your situation make all kinds of mistakes. Some get violent. Some get reckless. Some just fall apart." She leaned forward, her voice steady and professional. Sarah Chen speaking. "You strike me as smarter than that. Whatever you're planning, make sure it's legal. Make sure it's clean. And make sure you're ready for the fallout." I drove home that afternoon with 2 folders full of evidence and a plan forming in my mind. Kendra's car wasn't in the driveway, probably at another yoga class. I had the house to myself for at least 2 hours. I went straight to my home office and fired up my computer. Time to do what I did best, follow the money. If Kendra wanted to play games with our finances, she was about to learn that she'd picked the wrong opponent. I started with our joint checking account, then moved to credit cards, investment accounts, even the savings bonds we'd bought years ago for the kids' college funds. Every transaction, every deposit, every withdrawal, I documented it all. By the time Kendra got home, I had a complete financial audit of our marriage and a plan for what came next. Kendra came home that evening acting like nothing had happened, like she hadn't publicly humiliated me in front of our friends, like I hadn't walked out of Romano's and spent the night in a hotel. She breezed through the front door carrying shopping bags, humming some tune I didn't recognize. "Winston," she called out, "I picked up those steaks you like. Thought we could grill tonight." I looked up from my laptop. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, looking almost guilty, like she was trying to make up for something without actually apologizing for it. "Where were you today?" I asked. Kendra Thorne speaking. "Yoga, then some shopping with Linda. You know how it is." Linda, right? According to Sarah Chen's investigation, Linda had been covering for Kendra's affairs for months. Another name to add to my growing list of people who'd been lying to my face. How was yoga? I kept my voice neutral, conversational. Great. Damon really pushed us today. I think I'm finally getting the hang of that warrior pose. Damon. She said his name like he was just another instructor, not the man she'd been sleeping with for 6 months. The casual way she lied to me was almost impressive. I closed my laptop and stood up. You know what? Grilling sounds good. Let me go get the charcoal started. For the next hour, we played house. Kendra made a salad. I grilled the steaks. We talked about Vera's wedding plans, Miles's new apartment, the weather. Normal married couple conversation. If you didn't know better, you'd think we were happy. But I knew better now. I knew about the receipts hidden in her car. I knew about the prepaid phone Sarah had found evidence of. I knew about the joint savings account Kendra had been slowly draining to fund her new life. Most importantly, I knew something Kendra didn't. That I'd already moved 70% of our liquid assets into accounts she couldn't access. Money I transferred that morning while she was at yoga. After dinner, Kendra went upstairs to take a bath. I heard the water running, heard her phone buzzing with text messages she didn't want me to see. While she soaked in the tub I'd paid for, probably texting the man I was unknowingly funding, I made my final preparations. I opened my laptop one more time and logged into our joint credit card account. With a few keystrokes, I removed Kendra as an authorized user on both cards. Effective immediately. Next, I opened our joint checking account and scheduled an automatic transfer. Every penny above the minimum balance would move to my business account at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Let her explain to Damon why their lunch dates suddenly got a lot more expensive. Finally, I composed an email to my attorney. 3 words. It's time. Proceed. I hit send just as I heard Kendra pulling the plug on her bath. Tomorrow, her world would start falling apart. Tonight, she could enjoy her last evening as Mrs. Winston Thorne, financially secure housewife. Because by this time tomorrow, she'd be Kendra the adulteress, learning what life looked like without my safety net. Kendra walked into Belmont's boutique like she owned the place. I know because Miles had been tracking her location all morning, sending me updates from his office downtown. My son had turned into quite the ally. Seems he'd been waiting years for someone to finally hold his mother accountable. She was with her usual crew, Linda Morrison and Janet Carter, the same women who'd witnessed her humiliate me at Romano's 3 days ago. The same women who'd been covering for her affair while smiling to my face at neighborhood barbecues. I was across the street at Murphy's Coffee, watching through the window with my laptop open, finger hovering over the confirm button that would execute the final phase of my plan. At exactly 2:17 p.m., I clicked it. Every joint credit card, deactivated. Every shared account, frozen. Every automatic payment I've been covering for 6 months, stopped. My phone buzzed with a text from Miles. She's at the register, trying to pay. Through the boutique window, I could see Kendra pulling out her wallet with that confident smile she always wore when spending my money. The sales clerk ran the card, waited, frowned, tried again. Then I watched something beautiful happen. The clerk reached under the counter, pulled out a pair of scissors, and cut Kendra's card in half. Right there in front of Linda and Janet. Right there in front of a store full of other customers. Kendra's mouth fell open. She fumbled for her backup card, the business card I'd removed her from yesterday. Declined. She tried a third card. Declined again. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could see her face turning red. Linda was backing away like she didn't want to be associated with whatever was happening. Janet was pretending to look at scarves. My phone rang. Kendra. Winston, she said, and I could hear the panic in her voice. Something's wrong with our cards. They cut up my Visa right in front of everyone. This is humiliating. Winston Thorne speaking. Really? That's strange. Don't play dumb with me. Fix this. Now. Kendra Thorne speaking. I'm standing here like some kind of deadbeat while Linda and Janet watch. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? I almost laughed. 3 days ago, she questioned my manhood in front of our friends. Now she was learning what real embarrassment felt like. Kendra, I said calmly, you told everyone at Romano's that I wasn't man enough to leave. Turns out you were wrong about that too. The line went dead. I packed up my laptop and walked out of Murphy's Coffee, leaving Kendra to explain to her friends why the woman who'd been flaunting her financial freedom was suddenly unable to buy a $20 scarf. By the time I got home, she was already there, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. What have you done? she demanded. Winston Thorne speaking. I've removed your access to accounts you were using to fund your affair with Damon Reed. The color drained from her face. For the first time in our marriage, Kendra was speechless. Kendra sank into one of the kitchen chairs like her legs had given out. For a moment, she looked older than her 53 years. Makeup smudged, that perfectly styled hair disheveled from her panic at the boutique. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Winston Thorne speaking. Long enough. The real question is, how long did you think you could get away with it? She tried to summon some of her old defiance. Winston, we can work this out. It doesn't have to be like this. Kendra Thorne speaking. Damon doesn't mean anything. It was just excitement. You and we've been together for 26 years. That has to count for something. I opened my laptop and turned it toward her. Sarah Chin's investigation filled the screen. Photos, receipts, hotel bills, text messages. 6 months of evidence laid out like a prosecutor's case file. Excitement. I repeated. Is that what you call spending $8,000 of our money on your boyfriend? Is that what you call lying to our children about where you were every Tuesday and Thursday? Kendra's face went white as she scrolled through the evidence. You hired a private investigator? Winston, that's violating my privacy. The audacity was breathtaking. She'd been violating our marriage for half a year, but I was the one overstepping boundaries. Your privacy? I stood up, and for the first time in years, I let her see exactly how angry I was. You forfeited your right to privacy when you started using our joint accounts to fund hotel rooms with your yoga instructor. Winston Thorne speaking. You want to know what violating privacy looks like? It's finding out your wife has been laughing about your cluelessness in text messages to her boyfriend. It's discovering she's been planning weekend getaways while telling you she's visiting her sick aunt. Kendra tried to reach for my hand. I pulled away. The accounts are closed, Kendra. The cards are canceled. Your name is off the house, off the business accounts, off everything. You wanted excitement. You got it. Now you get to figure out how exciting life is when you're paying your own bills. Kendra Thorne speaking. You can't do this. Half of everything is mine. We have laws about this. I smiled. The first genuine smile I'd felt in months. Actually, we have a prenup. Remember? The one you insisted was just a formality when we got married? Turns out it has a very specific clause about adultery. You might want to have a lawyer look at it. I closed the laptop and headed for the door. Where are you going? She called after me. Winston Thorne speaking. To pick up Vera for dinner. She doesn't know about any of this yet, but she will soon. Then she'll have to decide which parent she wants in her life. Winston, please. We can fix this. I stopped at the doorway and turned back one last time. Kendra, you told our friends I wasn't man enough to leave. You were wrong. I'm man enough to leave, man enough to rebuild, and man enough to make sure you never get the chance to humiliate me again. The front door closed behind me with a sound like the end of a chapter one was glad to finish. Vera showed up in my hotel room that evening with red eyes and a box of tissues. My daughter had always been the peacemaker in our family, the one who tried to smooth over conflicts before they could escalate. Tonight, she looked like someone who'd been forced to choose sides in a war she never wanted to fight. Dad, she said, settling into the chair by the window, Mom called me. She's not making much sense right now. Vera Thorne speaking. She keeps saying you've stolen all her money and that you're trying to destroy the family. But Miles told me about the affair, about the evidence you found. I handed her a folder, a sanitized version of Sarah Chin's investigation. Nothing too graphic, but enough to show the scope of her mother's deception. Vera flipped through the pages slowly, her expression changing from confusion to hurt to something that looked like grief. 6 months, she said quietly. She was planning her affair while helping me plan my wedding. Vera Thorne speaking. Dad, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. It's not your fault, sweetheart. You shouldn't have to apologize for your mother's choices. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sunset through the hotel window. Finally, Vera spoke again. There's something else, she said. Something I think you should know. Mom's been different lately. More than just the affair. Her moods have been all over the place. Vera Thorne speaking. Last month, she spent $3,000 on art supplies because she decided she was going to become a painter. The month before that, it was a business plan for opening a boutique. She gets these intense obsessions and then just drops them. That explains some of the erratic spending I'd noticed. The sudden purchases that made no sense. The projects that appeared and disappeared overnight. Has she seen a doctor about this? I asked. She won't. She says doctors just want to put labels on everything. But Dad, sometimes she's so manic she can't sit still, and other times she won't get out of bed for days. Vera Thorne speaking. Miles thinks she might be bipolar. He's been researching it online. This complicated things. If Kendra was dealing with mental health issues on top of the affair, it changed the moral landscape of what I was doing. But it didn't change the facts. She'd still betrayed our marriage, still lied to our children, still humiliated me in public. Vera, I said carefully, whatever your mother is going through, it doesn't excuse what she's done, but it might explain some of it. I know. I don't want to lose both my parents over this. I reached over and took my daughter's hand. Winston Thorne speaking. You're not losing me. No matter what happens between your mother and me, you and Miles will always be my priority. Always. That night, after Vera left, I called Dr. Patricia Holbrook, a psychiatrist I'd met through one of my clients. If Kendra was dealing with bipolar disorder, I needed to understand what that meant for our divorce proceedings. The conversation gave me a lot to think about. 2 days later, I was in my office reviewing client files when Miles called, his voice tight with panic. Dad, you need to get to Mercy Hospital. Now. Miles Thorne speaking. It's Mom. She's in the emergency room. The drive to the hospital felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Despite everything that had happened, despite the affair and the lies, Kendra was still the mother of my children, the woman I'd loved for over half my life. I found Miles and Vera in the waiting room, both looking shaken. What happened? I asked. She collapsed at Linda Morrison's house, Vera said. They were having coffee, and Mom just fell over. Linda said she'd been acting strange all morning, talking really fast, not making much sense. Miles Thorne speaking. The doctors think it might have been a panic attack, but they're running tests to make sure it's not something more serious. A doctor appeared, young, tired-looking, with the kind of expression that said he'd seen too much human drama for one shift. Are you the family of Kendra Thorne? He asked. Dr. Williams speaking. I'm Dr. Williams. Your wife is stable, but I need to ask you some questions about her recent behavior. We spent the next hour going through Kendra's symptoms, the mood swings, the erratic spending, the sudden personality changes, the risky behavior. Dr. Williams listened without judgment, making notes. Mr. Thorne, he said finally, I think your wife may be experiencing a bipolar episode. The stress of recent events may have triggered what we call a manic phase, followed by a severe crash. Dr. Williams speaking. Has she been sleeping? Eating regularly? Has she mentioned feeling invincible or having grandiose plans? Miles and Vera exchanged glances. She told me last week she was going to start her own business, Vera said. Something about becoming a life coach. She'd drawn up this whole business plan in one night. Miles Thorne speaking. And she hasn't been sleeping much. I called her at 2 a.m. last Tuesday, and she was wide awake, reorganizing the garage. The pieces were falling into place. The affair with Damon might not have been calculated betrayal. It might have been impulsive behavior during a manic episode. Can I see her? I asked. Dr. Williams nodded. She's awake, but sedated. Try to keep the conversation calm. Kendra looked small in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors and 4 lines. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. Winston, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. Kendra Thorne speaking. Everything feels so out of control, like I'm watching someone else make terrible decisions with my life. For the first time in weeks, I saw my wife instead of the stranger who'd been living in our house. We'll go to figure this out, I said, taking her hand. All of it. But even as I said the words, I knew our marriage was still over. Mental illness might explain her behavior, but it couldn't undo the damage that had been done. 3 weeks after Kendra's hospital stay, she decided to take her fight public. I was reviewing quarterly tax reports when Miles called, his voice tight with anger. Dad, you need to see what Mom just posted on Facebook. Miles Thorne speaking. She's completely lost it. The post was a masterpiece of self-destruction. Kendra had written a 1,000-word rant about financial abuse and controlling husbands who abandon their wives during mental health crises. She tagged everyone we knew, neighbors, friends, family members, even some of my business clients. My husband cut off all my credit cards and bank access without warning. The post read, "He hired private investigators to spy on me and turn our children against me. This is what financial abuse looks like, ladies. Don't let your husbands control you like this." The comment section was a battlefield. Linda Morrison and Janet Carter had posted supportive messages, but they were outnumbered by people who knew the real story. Tom Henderson had written, "Maybe tell the whole truth, Kendra." Sarah Chun, my private investigator, had somehow found the post and simply commented, "Documentation is everything." But the worst part was watching Kendra dig herself deeper with every response. She was arguing with neighbors, sharing private details about our marriage, and making increasingly wild accusations. In one comment, she claimed I'd been planning to leave her for years. In another, she accused me of hiding money in offshore accounts. "She's tagged half her client list," Miles said when I called him back. Miles Thorne speaking. "Dad, this is going to hurt your business. People are going to see this and wonder what kind of man cuts off his wife's credit cards." "Let them wonder," I said. "Anyone who knows me knows the truth." But Miles was right to be concerned. By the end of the day, I'd received 3 calls from clients asking if everything was okay. Word travels fast in a small business community. That evening, Vera stopped by my hotel room with a laptop and a grim expression. "Dad, it gets worse," she said, showing me Kendra's Instagram account. Vera Thorne speaking. "She's been posting photos of the hospital, calling herself a survivor of financial abuse. She's even posted screenshots of your lawyer's letters." The Instagram posts were even more damaging than Facebook. Kendra had shared photos of legal documents, bank statements, even parts of Sarah Chen's investigation report. She was violating attorney-client privilege, breaching confidentiality agreements, and probably committing defamation. "She's going to get herself sued," I said. "Or arrested," Vera replied. "Dad, some of these documents have other people's personal information on them. Social security numbers, account numbers. This isn't just embarrassing anymore. It's criminal." I called my attorney, David Richardson, and forwarded him screenshots of everything. "Winston," David said after reviewing the posts, "this actually helps our case. Your wife is demonstrating exactly the kind of judgment that led to this situation in the first place." David Richardson speaking. "I'm going to file for an emergency restraining order to prevent her from posting any more confidential information. And I think we should expedite the divorce proceedings." That night, I sat in my hotel room watching Kendra destroy what was left of her reputation in real time. Every comment, every post, every angry response was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. The woman who'd questioned my manhood was proving that sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is walk away. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office, a clean, modern space downtown that felt like the beginning of something instead of the end. The divorce was final, the business was thriving, and for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Kendra had eventually taken down the social media posts, but not before they'd cost her most of her friendships and what remained of her credibility. She'd moved in with her sister in Phoenix, where she was reportedly getting the mental health treatment she needed. I wish her well with that, genuinely. Mental illness wasn't her fault, but the choices she'd made during her illness were still her responsibility. Miles knocked on my office door, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the kind of smile I hadn't seen from him in years. "Dad," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "I have some news." Miles Thorne speaking. "I'm getting married." Jennifer said yes last night. Jennifer was the kind of woman I'd always hoped my son would find, smart, independent, and completely unimpressed by his mother's drama. She'd stood by Miles through the worst of the divorce, never once suggesting he should choose sides. "That's wonderful," I said, meaning it. "When's the wedding?" "Next spring." "And Dad?" We want to walk Jennifer down the aisle. "Her father passed away 2 years ago, and she considers you family." Miles Thorne speaking. "We also want to make sure you know that Mom won't be invited. We can't risk her causing a scene." It saddened me that it had come to that, but I understood. Kendra had burned too many bridges, hurt too many people. Actions had consequences, even when mental illness was involved. Vera appeared in the doorway, holding her own coffee and grinning. "Did he tell you the news?" she asked. Vera Thorne speaking. "We're going to have such a beautiful wedding. And Dad, Jennifer wants to know if you'd consider giving a speech at the reception." I looked at my children, both successful, both happy, both choosing to build lives based on honesty and respect instead of deception and manipulation. Whatever pain the divorce had caused, they'd emerge stronger. "I'd be honored," I said. That evening, I drove past the house where Kendra and I had raised our family. The new owners had painted it blue and planted roses in the front yard. It looked happy, which seemed right somehow. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chun. Saw the announcement in the paper. "Congratulations on Miles's engagement. You've raised good kids." I had raised good kids, and I'd rebuilt my life on my own terms, without compromise, without accepting behavior that diminished my worth as a man. 3 years ago, Kendra had told a restaurant full of people that I wasn't man enough to leave. She'd been wrong about that, just like she'd been wrong about so many other things. Real men don't stay in situations that destroy their dignity. Real men protect their children from toxic behavior, even when it comes from their own mothers. Real men build new lives when the old ones become unsustainable. I was 58 years old, financially secure, surrounded by people who respected me, and finally free to be the man I'd always been underneath, just quieter about it than most. Winston Thorne speaking. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. And sometimes, walking away leads you exactly where you're supposed to be.